The Honduras-El Salvador War, often famously called the Football War, was a brief conflict that took place in July 1969. Despite its nickname, the war wasn't actually caused by soccer, though a heated World Cup qualifying match did act as the final spark. Here is the simplified breakdown of what actually happened. 1. The real root causes. The underlying tension between the two neighboring Central American countries had been building for years due to economic and social pressures. Land shortage versus overpopulation. El Salvador is geographically small but had a large, dense population. Honduras is much larger but had a smaller population. Migration. Over 300,000 Salvadoran peasants had crossed the border into Honduras to look for land and work, making up a significant portion of the Honduran agricultural workforce. Land reform friction. In 1969, Honduras launched a land reform law. To appease local Honduran farmers, the government began evicting Salvadoran immigrants and reclaiming their land, forcing thousands of Salvadorans to flee back home. This strained diplomatic relations to the breaking point. 2. The spark. The soccer matches. In June 1969, the two countries played a 3-game elimination series to see who would qualify for the 1970 FIFA World Cup. Game 1. Honduras won. Riots broke out. Game 2. El Salvador won. Even worse violence occurred, and the Honduran team had to be escorted out by armored cars. Game 3. El Salvador won the deciding match on June 27th. By the end of the matches, borders were closing, diplomatic ties were officially broken, and the media in both countries was printing heavy propaganda against the other. 3. The conflict. On July 14, 1969, the Salvadoran military launched an airstrike and a ground invasion into Honduras. The war lasted only 100 hours. The Organization of American States quickly stepped in and negotiated a ceasefire, which took effect on July 18th. Salvadoran troops eventually withdrew in early August. 4. The aftermath. Though short, the war had severe consequences. Casualties. Around 2,000 to 3,000 people lost their lives. Economic damage. The Central American common market was severely disrupted, hurting the economies of both nations. Social crisis. Over 100,000 displaced Salvadorans returned to an already overcrowded El Salvador, which worsened social unrest and eventually contributed to the Salvadoran Civil War a decade later. A formal peace treaty between the two nations wasn't signed until 1980, and their border dispute was finally settled by the International Court of Justice in 1992.